This is one of my favorite concepts. I truly believe that it is easier to get to $10, $20, even $30,000 a month in sales rather than being a business owner or a dropshipper or a media buyer. I think the avenue or the vehicle of sales is the best vehicle you can take to get to what you would call rich, which is, your penthouses, your nice clothing, your nice watches, cars, whatever your fix is. But everything does have an equal flip side. And so in that, I also think that salespeople, sales reps, are the most susceptible to fall into the traps that come when you're trying to take rich to wealthy. There are so many traps along the way in any kind of growth to being a wealthy individual, to building wealth. But I do think sales reps are the most susceptible to falling into them because of the speed of success that you see so many sales reps have. So today, it's gonna be a little different. Instead of telling you how to succeed in sales, I'm actually gonna warn you on what happens when you do succeed. Today, we're gonna go over the path to building wealth in sales and all the traps that come along with it. Let's dive in. Roll intro. So just like we do in sales calls, let's set an agenda to the lesson. 3 main topics we're gonna hit today. Number 1 is the turtle versus the rabbit. Number 2 is the deadly trap that most reps fall victim to. And number 3 is the vertical path to building wealth in sales. Number 1, the turtle and the rabbit. We all know the childhood story of the turtle and the rabbit. The turtle and the rabbit take a race. The rabbit knows I'm clearly faster, speeds off, dusts the turtle, gets to the halfway point, looks back and realizes I have a lot of space. I think I can chill for a little bit. So the rabbit takes a nap. And it takes a little bit longer of a nap than it thought it would. And it wakes up and it's dark out. So it speeds off. It gets to the finish line and realizes the turtle is there waiting for it. And the moral of the story normally is that slow and steady wins the race. But today, we're going to take a different meaning to this story, and we're going to bring this back to wealth creation and building wealth. See, in 99% of endeavors, building wealth is a long timeline. Let's say you want to get to 6 figures, just 6 figures a year as a YouTuber. It can take 2 or 3 years before ad revenue starts to get there. Let's say you want to do it as an agency owner. It can take 1, 2, 3 years before you start hitting those 10K months. As a media buyer, you might be looking at 5 years before you start to actually see a 6-figure run rate every year. Even in your traditional roles, lawyer, doctor, you're looking at a decade of schooling and then you come out, with the 6-figure run rate, but you're in massive debt. And so the actual amount that you take back is mid-5s, if even. And so the point I'm trying to get at is in most endeavors, the timeline to getting to that 6-figure mark is very, very long. It's called a long runway. Longer runway means slower. And just like in this analogy, most other endeavors are the turtles. And if you look at the childhood story, the turtle can win the race. Speed can be as much of a hindrance as it can be a superpower. Speed can be as much of a friend as it can be an enemy. If we go back to the other models, the other endeavors, let's just use agency ownership, for example. In that long runway, agency owners build maturity, financially and personally, right? They start to realize that money is a tool. They start to build strong money habits. They burn away a lot of their ego and pride that makes them spend money foolishly because they work diligently and extremely hard for really little return for a very long time. But sales reps were almost the lottery winners in the game of business, right? And I do want to set expectation properly here. You do have a lot of hard work ahead of you and you have a lot of learning. But I've seen sales reps make 10, 20K a month in the first 2 or 3 months that they get into the game. Some reps get there fast and it screws them because in a way they didn't earn it. See, unlike agency owners, they didn't have that long runway where they had to work diligently for little reward. They didn't have to burn away their pride. They didn't build the strong money habits. And so just like lottery winners do, they burn their money in stupid, foolish ways. They get rich, but they don't build wealth. They think they've mastered the game after 2 or 3 months because they see some financial reward. And ultimately, they are running this race and they get halfway in and they take a nap and lose. So to reiterate, speed can be as much your friend as it can be your enemy. I want you guys to remember that. Just like you see speed signs and speed warnings and speed limits on motorways, put it on a sticky note on your computer. Get it tattooed on yourself. Put a poster on your wall. I probably shouldn't, for legal reasons, say get a tattoo. So let's retract that statement. Don't get a tattoo because I said so. But make sure you remember that on a day-to-day basis, speed can be as much your enemy as it can be your friend, because this creeps in. Unless you are diligent on making sure you remember that, what speed does, and we'll get into this in a second, but speed gives you perspective warp. It changes how you look at reality. It almost distorts your reality. And speed feeds us into topic number 2, which is the deadly sin most reps fall into, and that sin is ego. Let's not beat around the bush. I know that you're here in this series learning sales because you want to make a lot of money. And that's cool. I totally get it. And even if you have really selfless reasons, like wanting to donate to causes or build schools in Nepal or take care of your family, there's always selfishness behind wanting to make a lot of money. There's always deep down rooted reasons that people want to do that. And a lot of the time it comes down to ego. And if we take this, if you've ever seen the movie Captain America, if you haven't, it's a Marvel movie. It's about, essentially this German dude takes this little skinny guy and injects him with needles, and the needles make him this big as buff, really strong superhero. But before that happens, when they're trying to look at who they want to take to be that new superhero, if you will, the German guy says that the chemical, the drug, enhances everything. It enhances strength, it enhances courage, but it also enhances the negatives. It enhances selfishness and ego and pride. And all the things that can be good things, but also can be bad things. It enhances. And that's what money is. Money does not make people inherently evil after they have it. Money amplifies who you are. And this is why speed brings us to ego. See, if we go back again to the other endeavors, whether it's being a YouTuber, a media buyer, an agency owner, a lawyer, a doctor, whatever it is, the runways are long. And in those runways, you destroy pride, you destroy ego, because you have to work diligently for little reward. And what happens is you realize that your worth and your work has nothing to do with the financial success. It has to do with what you're actually fulfilled by. And so you build maturity in that runway. But as sales reps, because of the speed we go at, we don't have that runway. We pretty much take off as soon as we start. We put our work in, and then within 1 month, we get a commission check. And so we get instant gratification from the work that we put in. And we have a quick runway. And what happens is we just don't destroy our pride. We don't destroy our ego. And so then money comes in and it amplifies who we are. And we still have all this pride and ego and kind of dirtiness inside. And all it does is kind of add gas to that fire. And the reason this is so detrimental to your long-term success, to building wealth, is because ego is like heroin to wealth. It feels really good in the moment, but it gets you nowhere in life. And being a sales rep, what we're kind of doing is we're picking a house in the top heroin city in the country between 2 heroin dealers. Like, we're putting ourselves all around ego. And so if we don't recognize that, if we just lived life as norm between 2 heroin dealers in a heroin city and we just went about life, the odds of us falling susceptible to that trap, they're pretty high. And so the reason we're stuck on this first and second point in this lesson is because I really need you to know the first thing you need to do to avoid this trap, to make sure you don't fall into that trap of ego, is you just have to be aware of it. And you have to be aware of the fact that you're wearing essentially speed goggles that completely warp your perception. I'm telling you guys, once you get your first 10K, 20K check, you're going to think you're 10 times better than you are. You're going to think, wow, I'm crushing it. I'm more successful than most people. And it's because I'm more valuable and better to them. But in reality, it's not. It's not hard to do that in sales. What's hard to do in sales is not feel that way and not think that way. And instead of giving into our ego, to be deliberate about thinking, no, that's ego talking, that's speed talking. I'm gonna do the mature thing. See, the funny joke is, in sales, we feel like we're better than business owners and people that aren't doing $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 a month. We feel like we've outworked them, but in the long run, it's like we go like this and they go like this. If you can graph that overlay, they outgrow us. And eventually they look back and they have millions in the bank. They have stocks that are paying them passive income. They've built wealth. They don't need to work anymore. But most sales reps, even if they're making $200,000, $300,000 a year, they're in debt and they're working paycheck to paycheck. And it's because they never got out of the trap of ego and speed. It's incredibly easy to make money in sales. It's incredibly challenging to build wealth with it. So to make sure that we don't feed into that ego and put the needle in the arm, here are 5 actionables that I personally recommend to make sure we build strong money habits. Number 1 is take every paycheck and donate 5%. It's not actually about being charitable and the good deed. Don't get me wrong, that's a cool byproduct. But more so, it's about building good money habits and realizing that the money we earn really isn't anything else but a tool. Number 2, and this is an easy one, stay away from designer brands. You don't need Gucci or Louis Vuitton or any big brands that really at the end of the day, you're only getting to show people how well you do. Designer brands are nothing but ego hits. And trust me when I say, it doesn't matter how cool the LV shoes are that you get, after you wear them for a month, you're gonna be like, you know what, these were definitely not worth $1,000 or $2,000 to spend for them. I'd rather have the cash in my account. Stay away from designer brands. There's nothing that will feed into ego war than number 2. Designer brands, stay away. Clean cut it. Fucking, that's a needle in the arm right away. Number 3 is unless you're actually working in an area that is just really, really bad, or you live in an area that's really bad, don't move. Don't get a new place. Don't immediately inflate the amount of cash that you are spending every month because you're making more money. I see this all the time, but sales reps come into cash and the first thing they start doing is spending cash. If you actually look at any statistics done on sales reps, 90% of sales reps making over $200,000 a year live paycheck to paycheck. And it's because they inflate their lifestyle as soon as they come to cash. And so number 3 is just make sure you don't do that. Again, build strong money habits. What's really cool is if you look at the other endeavors, agency owners, business owners, YouTubers, media buyers, etc., when they come into cash, they don't spend it. And again, it's because they had that long runway. They didn't have the speed to success we have. They burn off that ego. They build maturity. They build strong money habits. And so they get good at building cash in their accounts. But sales reps, instantly, they inflate their monthly costs. And so they could be making $20,000 a month and spending $22,000 a month. And so number 3, don't move, don't get a new place, stay where you are. Number 4, and this is one that personally got me for the first 5 years that I was in sales, but it's don't cover the check when you eat out for the entire friend group that you're with. I still remember my first 10K and my first 20K month that I've ever made. I still remember going out, and it was almost like it was a celebration of a good month, if you will, but it would be 4 or 5 friends and the bill would be $500-$600, and I would cover it. And I would get home and be like, why the fuck did I do that? In the moment, it felt cool. Like I thought, oh wow, everyone's gonna think I'm doing really well. And it's like this big pride hit for like 30 seconds, and then no one thinks about it 2 minutes later, but you get home, you're $700, $800 in the hole, and you're like, why the fuck did I do that? And so number 4, just when you eat out, I know it sounds crazy, but this is gonna be something you struggle with when you start coming to cash. Don't feed into the pride, just do what everyone else does, split the check. It's so simple. I promise you it's gonna be harder than you think to do once you start getting into cash flow. But number 4, split the check. Don't cover restaurant checks, don't cover full checks, split the check. Number 5 is we actually force ourselves to live like agency owners or media buyers or any of the other endeavors that we talked about, and that is by living on 20% of the income that we make for the first 2 years that we're in sales. And so if you're making 10K per month, live off 2K and force yourself to be in the same spot that agency owners are, or YouTubers, or anyone else that we talked about. Force yourself to live like that because it'll build the maturity, it'll build the money habits, it'll tear away at the ego, but we still get the benefit of sales. And it's a great money habit anyway. Anyway, first 2 years, live off 20% of the income that you're earning. It's gonna be incredibly hard, not from the financial perspective, but just seeing the cash in the account and knowing that you shouldn't touch it. And the only reason you would want to touch it is for ego, I promise. And so again, 20%, live by that. I promise that it's gonna take you so much further than you think in 2 years. You're gonna hate me for the next 700 whatever days, 800, 720 days, 730 days. You're gonna hate me for those days. And then after, you're gonna be like, Paul, that was fucking genius. And so anyway, give this 2 years. 2 years from now, you can DM me and be like, yo, that worked, or maybe it didn't, but you won't say that. It'll fucking work. I promise it'll work. And the reason I'm so adamant about this is because I fell into these traps when I first got in sales. When I first got into sales, I had 2 cars. One was $105,000, one was $60,000. I lived in the most expensive apartment in my area that I could get. I had an $1,100 Louis Vuitton wallet. I constantly ate out with friends and constantly paid for the bills. And I remember making $18,000, $19,000, $20,000 and then not being able to fill my car, my $100,000 car with gas until my next paycheck came in because I was just spending every single penny that came into the account. And so everyone thought I was doing really well. Everyone thought I was, cashing it and kind of living to society's standard of what rich looks like. But I felt so fraudulent. I felt like a fraud at the end of the day. And yeah, don't get me wrong, my pride was hit when I was with people, but like my actual soul, my inner being, every day I felt like a fraud. Every day I felt just bad. And again, I don't think there's a single heroin addict that is proud of the fact that they're a heroin addict. And I don't think there's a single person who fits into ego that at the end of the day is glad that they fed into ego. And so The reason I'm so adamant about this is I don't want you to fall into the same traps that I fell into and that I see so many sales reps fall into. I know you came to Educate because you wanted to learn the hard skill sets, like sales principles and techniques and frameworks and different lines and word tracks. And you'll get that, don't get me wrong. But before we get there, what's really important is we build on strong foundations. And then one foundation, beside being ethical and honorable, that I want to make sure you have, is making sure you understand that speed is gonna fuck you unless you deliberately make an effort for it not to. And ego is nothing but a short-term hit, and you will absolutely fall into ego, just like lottery winners do, unless you're aware of it. And so this foundational stuff, I know it's almost kind of boring, guys, but trust me, more than anything, I wanna make sure that if you're getting into this, you don't fall into the same traps that I did, that you don't fall into the same traps that 90-something% of sales reps do. Anyway, last topic, now that you know what not to do, what should we do to actually build wealth in sales? Where does being a remote sales rep fit into building long-term wealth, to wealth that will feed your family after you're gone? First thing we actually have to do is just define what wealth is to you. To me personally, wealth is when low active income streams pay for your cost of living, meaning things that you're really not putting too much time into are creating cash flow that cover your everyday life. To me, that's true wealth. That's freedom, because then you don't have to work. You only work if you want to. And so let's say to get there that you need to live off $80,000 a year. And we're gonna keep our investment style super simple. We're just gonna do what Warren Buffett says, go for 8% APY, just invest into the S&P 500. That means that true wealth is $1 million in the account, producing $80,000 a year of cash flow that we can live off. So to get there, there are really 3 channels that we can look at. Number 1 is just sales through and through. Number 2 is vertical ascension. And number 3 is sales to business, which is technically a vertical transition. Number 1, pathway to get to $1 million or building wealth in sales is just sales through and through. You don't have to go become a sales manager or a COO or start a business to build wealth. You can just stay on sales calls. And some people just want to do that. There's nothing wrong with saying, I like doing this. I don't need to grow into another role. If you've ever watched Top Gun Maverick, it's a really, really good movie, by the way. He just wants to fly jets. He doesn't want to command divisions of the military. He just wants to be in the plane. He wants to be in the cockpit. And there's no judgment on that. There's nothing wrong with that. If you want to live the laptop lifestyle and be able to be nomadic and not have to worry about teams and managing people and operations, it's cool. You can just stay a sales rep. And let's say, for the most part, that we cap at an income ceiling of $30,000 per month, $360,000 a year. And after we take out living expenses and taxes, let's say we put $100,000 away every year toward that $1 million goal. Well, that's 10 years until we're creating $80,000 a year cash flow on 8% APY. 10 years to being retired. If you're 18, you're retired at 28. If you're 20, 30, if you're 25, 35, that's not bad at all. And that's just sales through and through. But let's say you want to get there faster. Or let's say that you don't want to live off 80 grand a year, but you want to live off 250 or 500 grand a year. You want to have a higher quality of living than 80 grand can provide. There's nothing wrong with that. We just usually have to stack skills on top of sales for you to get there. And so that's when we get into vertical ascension. And one last trap, speaking of vertical ascension, most reps try to vertically ascend too quickly. What happens is they get to that $10,000, maybe even $20,000 per month super fast, and they think that the ascension should be just as fast. They think that the timeline to go from 0 to 10 or 0 to 20 is the same that it should be to go from 10 or 20 to 50, but it's not. In sales, you have a very quick growth up front and then very steady growth after. Most other endeavors, you have a very slow growth and then a quick growth on the other end. It's called the popcorn effect. In sales, we have the opposite. And so the reason I'm saying this is because speed, again, is going to warp you or change your perspective here. It's going to make you think that you should be getting off sales calls and ascending faster than you should. But it took me 5 years, 6 years in sales before I started to even think about doing anything else outside of being on calls. And it took me 10 years to become a COO. And so vertical ascension, it can take time. There's nothing wrong with it taking time. Don't think that because you're making $10,000 or $20,000 a month that you've capped out in sales, that you are now ready to vertically ascend, that you've done it, that you've mastered the game. Make it painfully slow. Anyway, just keep in mind speed. Speed is always going to change your perspective on this. Anyway, back to vertical ascension. Number 2, when we need to start creating more cash flow quicker, what we have to do is increase our income ceiling. And the way to do that is by stacking skill sets. And so that can be going from being a sales rep to a sales manager, which is now training sales reps so that they're more effective. And the larger the company and the more sales reps there are, the more effective they are, the more of an impact that makes to the company's revenue. It could also be in marketing, which is essentially just sales on a one-to-many note. And so once we start stacking skill sets, what normally happens, and this is the same for number 3 with business ownership too, but what normally happens is we'll actually take a pay cut because we go from doing something we're good at to something we're less good at. And so we take a short pay cut, but we increase our ceiling potential or our income ceiling potential. And so in sales, we might have a ceiling of $30,000, but in sales management, maybe we have a ceiling of $40,000 or $50,000. And as a CMO, maybe we have a ceiling of $75,000. And you can start stacking skill sets. And every time you take a vertical ascension, every time I've ever gone higher and higher in a company, I've almost always taken a pay hit, but with the ability and the long-term vision of being able to make more. And it's the same with number 3, which is business ownership. And so in vertical ascension, what we're doing is we're stacking skills vertically. We're taking sales and we're taking it to the next level, which is possibly sales management or sales on a one-to-many thing on marketing. Business ownership is not vertical stacking, it's horizontal stacking. It's saying, I'm good at sales, and what I'm going to start doing now is adding different things in and becoming good at those as well. It could be, I'm good at sales, and now I'm going to add in operations, and I'm going to add in service delivery, and I'm going to add in outbound SDR work. And you're becoming good at many skill sets. And so vertical ascension is becoming a master of one. Business ownership, or horizontal ascension, if you will, is becoming a master of many, a jack of all trades, if you will. Whichever path you choose, there's no right or wrong to any of them. It just comes down to what your taste is and what your timeline is and how you want to get there. I've personally done all 3. I've been on sales calls for 10 years. I started my own business and horizontally stacked skills. I found out which skills I like and got into vertical ascension and started working with businesses, of course now being Educate, and started vertically growing. And so there's no right or wrong. And you actually might find yourself doing all 3 just like I did. The important part is just making sure you always keep in mind how they play into your long-term picture of building wealth. So with that said, I'll end this lesson with 3 main pieces of advice to make sure you always continue and take on from here on out. Number 1 is always remember speed can be as much your friend as it can be your enemy. Always remember that you're going to have perspective warp because of how fast you're going in sales. Number 2 is that no step you're about to take is more important than the step that you're currently taking, which means that while we're a sales rep, don't focus on other things that we might want to do in the future. Focus on bettering the craft and becoming a better sales rep. Obsess over what you do, not over what you might. And number 3, to make sure that we consistently keep growing, whether that's vertically or horizontally, or even as a sales rep if we're just staying on sales calls, follow my 6-month and 3-year rule. Never stay at a company for less than 6 months, and never stay at a company unless there's a really good reason for it for more than 3 years. And the reason for that is if you stay for less than 6 months, you're usually just going to build a bad reputation for yourself. But if you stay for more than 3 years, what tends to happen is you actually start to stall your learning curve and you start to only learn the same thing over and over and over. We want to make sure that every 3 years we're learning in different ways. And so if the company you're with is doing amazing things and you're learning consistently every single day, you can say that I'm getting better and better and better. You can stay 15 years. But if for 3 years in and you're doing the same thing every single day, and at the end of the day, you don't feel like you're being challenged, it's time to leave. If you take those pieces of advice and you adhere to the warnings that we talked about in this lesson, then the only other factor to building wealth in sales is time. And always just remember, you're in a race with being the person you want to be at the age that you want to be them. And so don't take a nap. Don't take a nap in the middle of the race. And remember, the rabbit can win if the rabbit remembers that speed can be as much his friend as it is his enemy. I hope this lesson was helpful for you. In 2 years, I'm excited to get your messages saying, Paul, that lesson was life-changing. I see myself versus other sales reps, and I understand why those lessons were so important. I understand why you gave us those warnings. I'm excited to see you in the next lesson. I'm excited to get out of the warnings and back into the fun stuff. Until then, happy hunting.